The rain had been falling for hours, turning the quiet street in Columbus, Ohio into a river of reflections. The streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement, and the wind carried the cold scent of an approaching storm. On the steps of a closed grocery store sat a woman and two small children, wrapped in a thin blanket that barely protected them from the cold. When someone passing by asked if they were okay, the woman gave a small, tired smile and quietly said they were just waiting. But the truth was heavier than those simple words. They weren't waiting for anyone. They had nowhere else to go. Before we continue, take a moment to support stories like this. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of compassion, please like this video, share it with someone who cares about humanity, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that need them most. The woman's name was Sarah Mitchell, a 32-year-old mother who had once believed life would be stable and predictable. Just a year earlier she had been working at a small diner in Columbus while raising her two children, Noah, who was 8, and Grace, who was 5. They had a tiny apartment that smelled of old carpet and warm soup, but it was home. Sarah worked long shifts, often returning late at night with sore feet but a grateful heart because her children were safe and had a roof over their heads. But life rarely warns you before it changes everything. When the diner closed suddenly after its owner filed for bankruptcy, Sarah lost her job overnight. At first she believed it would only be temporary. She searched everywhere, filling out applications, waiting in long lines, and making calls that rarely led anywhere. Bills piled up quietly, like shadows creeping across the floor. Rent notices appeared on the apartment door. Eventually, the landlord stopped knocking politely. The day Sarah packed their belongings into 2 worn bags, she kept telling the children it was just a short adventure. She promised them things would get better soon. But deep inside, fear grew louder each day. Now they sat outside the grocery store because the small shelter downtown had run out of space that night. Sarah had walked for hours trying to find somewhere warm for the children. Her shoes were soaked, and her hands trembled from the cold. Still, she kept her voice gentle when speaking to Noah and Grace, pretending the night was only a delay before something better arrived. Across the street, a man named Michael Turner was locking the door of his hardware store. At 51, Michael had lived most of his life in Columbus. His shop had been passed down from his father, and though business wasn't extraordinary, it had always been enough. That evening he noticed the small figures sitting under the store's dim awning. At first he assumed they were simply waiting for a ride, but something about the stillness of the scene made him pause. Michael watched for a moment longer. The children leaned against their mother, and the wind pushed the blanket away from their shoulders. Something about the sight stirred an old memory he rarely spoke about. Years earlier, after his father passed away and business struggled, Michael himself had once spent several nights sleeping in his car. He remembered the quiet shame of pretending everything was fine. Without thinking too much, Michael crossed the street. He approached slowly, not wanting to scare them. Up close he could see how exhausted Sarah looked. Her eyes carried the kind of tiredness that sleep alone could never fix. The children looked up cautiously. Sarah gave the same polite smile she had used all evening and explained they were simply waiting. But Michael understood what those words often meant. He asked if they had eaten dinner. Sarah hesitated for a moment before shaking her head slightly. Michael walked back to his store and returned with sandwiches from the small refrigerator he kept inside for late work nights. The children's faces lit up immediately, and Sarah tried to hide the tears forming in her eyes as they thanked him. That night didn't magically solve their problems. But it changed something important. Michael learned their story piece by piece. He discovered Sarah had experience in customer service and accounting from managing orders at the diner. He also realized something else. His own store had been struggling because he had been running it alone since his longtime employee retired. The next morning, Michael opened the shop early and offered Sarah a temporary job helping organize inventory and assist customers. It wasn't a grand opportunity, and the pay wasn't high, but it was steady. More importantly, it gave Sarah a place to stand again. For the first time in weeks, hope felt real. The days that followed were not easy. Sarah worked long hours while Noah and Grace spent afternoons at a nearby community center that offered after-school programs. Money was still tight, and Sarah and the children stayed at a modest family shelter while she saved every dollar she could. But slowly, life began to rebuild itself. Customers at the hardware store noticed Sarah's kindness and determination. She greeted everyone with patience, helped elderly customers carry heavy items, and reorganized shelves that had been chaotic for years. Within months, the store began doing better than it had in a long time. Michael often watched quietly from behind the counter, realizing that sometimes the right person arrives when you least expect it. 6 months later, Sarah signed the lease for a small apartment not far from the shop. It wasn't fancy, but when Noah and Grace ran through the door of their new home, laughing and exploring every corner, Sarah felt something she had nearly forgotten. Relief. And gratitude. One evening after closing the store, Sarah stood outside looking at the same street where she had once sat in the rain with nowhere to go. The memory still hurt, but it also reminded her how a single moment of kindness could change the direction of a life. Before we reach the end of this story, we want to ask something special from you. If you have ever experienced a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, write the word hope in the comments below so others can see how powerful compassion can be. Years later, the hardware store remained a cornerstone of the neighborhood. Sarah eventually became the store manager, and Noah and Grace grew up helping stock shelves during summer breaks. The community around them never forgot the quiet night when everything began to change. Sometimes people say they are just waiting. But behind those simple words might be a story of courage, struggle, and a hope that someone will notice. And sometimes, all it takes is one person who decides to cross the street. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel so more people can hear stories that remind us what humanity looks like. Your support helps keep these powerful stories alive. Because somewhere tonight, someone might still be sitting in the rain, saying they're just waiting, and hoping someone will see them.